Welcome to Las Vegas Live podcast.
Mhm.
Today we have a very special guest, Tiffany Jones. Tiffany, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
for
for having
coming.
me.
Thank you
I'm
for coming to the show. I've been following your campaign. Big fan.
Oh,
You've done a
thanks.
lot of work. Uh, First question, could you share with us how did your campaign go and difficult moments,
Hmm.
fun moments?
I think overall campaigning was super fun. It was very enjoyable. My favorite thing about campaigning, which a lot of candidates don't spend a lot of time on, is going door to door and meeting people in the neighborhood and your constituents, the people that you'll be representing. You are one of them because I remember that's how we met. I came to your door and you invited me in and we had a good chat. And just learning about real people and finding that mostly everybody has something in common. People want the same things, and we just have different ways of getting there if you're talking political lines and political parties. So I've really had a great time. I had experience because I did run in 2018 for Nevada State Senate. It is a bigger seat. Typically, there are two assembly districts per one state Senate district, and the Senate seats are for 4 years, and assembly is for 2 years. So I did have experience of doing interviews and going door to door, and mostly raising money is kind of the important part, and the money is important to get your message out. But doing interviews and for organizations that want to support you, it's really good to have those organizations help, such as the different chambers of commerce and just different groups like Keystone and even sitting legislators. It's great to have their support because they can come to your events, they can meet people, they can talk to people who, let's say I go to somebody's door and we don't see eye to eye on something. I can bring in a state legislator to help guide the conversation and say, listen, this is why we think this is why we want to pass this certain law. It's not because we're having an ulterior motive. We are in the state legislature working every day for the people and just being a representative. So I really enjoyed mostly getting to know people and learning that most people are kind of in the middle, and some people are a little bit to the right and some people are a little bit to the left. And right now, politics has been completely divisive just because of the media and the messages that we're getting thrown at us every day, and social media exacerbating those messages. So that was my favorite part of it, just meeting everybody.
Which messages or policies were you promoting, or which was your goal to achieve if you were to be elected?
My biggest goal for the state of Nevada was protecting the business environment. I was a small business owner from 2011 to 2019, and man, it is a lot of work. And it was very rewarding with having employees and being involved in the community and contributing to my community directly. And especially I was in the wedding industry, so I made boutique wedding cakes. And being in the wedding industry in the wedding capital of the world is pretty amazing. So I wanted everything. I wanted to just protect all those business owners that were affected by COVID. Even there were a lot of policies in place that, or policies that were on the table that perhaps might look good on paper, but not be wonderful for every business owner out there. It might work for an Amazon, but not for the mom and pop ice cream shop down the street. So that was my biggest goal, was protecting our business environment and keeping Nevada attractive to businesses that were perhaps thinking of moving out of their home state with our tax laws and just the freedoms, I guess, that we enjoy as business owners in Nevada that in other states might have certain restrictions. So, and then of course, education was a big part of that because that ties directly into the business community. If we don't have great schools, then these large corporations that are looking at Nevada as a home base are not going to want to move here and have their employees and their C suites raise their children in our state. So, no, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to edit that. But education was a top priority. And, like I said, it just ties right into the business community.
So what was the response of the people when you were meeting them at their, doors, and how did they respond to these messages, or maybe they had some more messages for you to?
Absolutely. So I live in, if I had won my campaign, I live in a very, as you know, suburban area with decent schools, a decent crime rates, pretty safe area. Most people still want better schools because they know that the public schools in Nevada are in the bottom. I think we were 48, 49, dead last at one point. So, and it hasn't changed over the past 2 decades. So, with Nevada being at the bottom, all the parents that I was meeting had the same concerns. We want our kids to do better in school. We want to be able to choose better schools for our children. So, school choice was a huge topic of discussion. And there are two sides to that in the school choice discussion. So, but I would say in my area, in the suburban Southern Highlands Mountains Edge, most parents wanted school choice. They want to be able to take their kids to whatever school they want to and not be tied to the zip code.
Now with post-COVID, situation, we have so many parents homeschooling their kids. So what is the actual issue with the schools when they have an option to homeschool their kids?
Well, you're talking about parents that still have to work normal 9 to 5 jobs. And I mean, with our economy, it takes two parents a lot of times to two incomes to be able to afford to live in our area. So most parents, I mean, that's kind of out of the question, homeschooling, unfortunately. Now, if there's one parent that's making enough income for the family, then and that makes sense, sure. However, there are a lot of parents that, I mean, it's kind of, I personally, and I have a BA in psychology, and I feel educated. I've been in the corporate world. I've been a business owner. I still wouldn't feel confident to be in charge of my own child's education as far as me being the only teacher. Now, do we have a schedule, and do we have, certain requirements and what do you call that? Like a syllabus or whatnot when they that we would get from the public school system in order to homeschool, and we could follow along, sure. But I still would rely on the professionals in the field. I would still rely on my daughter's teachers in order to educate her. And not just that, but there is a certain amount of socialization that occurs during school. And our kids, during COVID, we saw that that was very detrimental when they were home all the time and isolated from their peers.
What are the main issues which the business owners addressed to you and needed help with?
Mostly tax increases. They were worried about tax increases. They were worried about minimum wage increases. Even if their businesses didn't employ minimum wage employees, like say my business at the time, that was a big topic of discussion back in 2015 to 2018 was the minimum wage hikes. Well, I personally didn't even have any employees that were making minimum wage because I was paying over that. They were skilled workers. They had decorating skills. I was employing artists. And so at the time, I think my employees were making like $14 or $15 an hour, which was well over the minimum wage. Well, at the time, the topic was, well, we're going to raise the minimum wage to $15. Okay, I have no problem with that, I guess. But then now my skilled employee is now a minimum wage worker. And the biggest issue with that was when people see that wage on paper, they think that that's it. But as a business owner, you're still paying your insurance on that employee. You're still paying payroll taxes. So that $15 an hour employee, while they're getting all their taxes taken out of that $15, I'm having taxes also added on top. So they might cost me $22 or $23 with workman's comp and everything. So that's what scared me. Okay, now these skilled workers are going to want to make more, as they should, $22, let's say. But then now that $22 turns into 30. So we're doubling it
Mhm.
essentially for businesses, and like I said, perhaps an Amazon or a Tesla can absorb those costs, but bakery, we're making cupcakes for $3 a piece, we can't absorb that cost. So, and that all comes out of the business owner's pocket. And I think there's a perception that, oh, if you own a business that you're rich. Oh, I've never been rich. We have always been very middle class, and I was lucky enough at the time when I was married to my ex-husband that he was able to pay all our household bills while I started my dream of the bakery. I only paid myself after 3 years of full operations. And that was, the business was making 400, 500,000 a year. But there's so many costs involved that I wasn't paying myself. I was paying back all the loans that I had from doing the build out of the bakery and equipment. So, and then rent, I wanted to have a certain buffer so that I'm not scrambling for rent every month. The rent was $4,000 or $5,000 a month in a $1,200 space commercially in Vegas at the time. I'm sure it's even more now. And so I did have a certain amount of loans. So I wasn't paying. Once all those loans got paid, then after 3 years, I was paying myself very conservative amount of $1,000 a month.
Wow.
So, people think like, oh, she's got this great bakery and she's got all these accounts and, the bakery's doing well and it's $2,000 for a wedding cake. Well, the reality of that is I can only sell two or three of those $2,000 wedding cakes in a day based on my work, my staff, and my workload,
Hmm.
and be able to provide the same level of service to my clients. So,
How did you start the bakery? I know that
um,
you came from San Diego.
yes. Hmm.
How did you start it?
So, I was born, raised, and educated in San Diego, and I started a teaching credential program after I graduated from UCSD with a bachelor's in psychology. And I think teachers were just so burnt out because part of the teaching credential program was going to like subbing, like being a substitute teacher in the public school system, which is great. But in the program, all of us were working, and these teachers were just talking like complaining about everything about the jobs, and like it doesn't pay enough, and we're burnt out, and we just have so much on our plate. And it's not even the workload, but the feeling of responsibility that you're in charge of the like forming these little minds, that it almost discouraged me. And I said, I don't know that being a teacher is really the right thing for me.
Mhm.
So I decided to go to culinary school. I just wanted to drop everything, which is what I did. And I went to San Francisco for a baking and pastry arts credential at Le Cordon Bleu in San Francisco. So I lived there for a year. And I ended up in Orange County working at the Four Seasons in Newport Beach. And I wanted to stay with the company. They were closing that location. So that's how I ended up in Vegas. I just transferred to the nearest location. And during that time, I just ended up falling in love with wedding cakes. I think a lot of artistic people that's in the pastry field and culinary is very artistic. But my forte ended up being wedding cakes. I didn't really go to culinary school for that. I wanted to be a like a dessert pastry chef in a restaurant on the strip or in New York, or I had like you have all these fancy ideas in your head. But I ended up doing wedding cakes and I ended up being really, really good at it. And through that time, I ended up making a lot of relationships in that job at the Four Seasons. There were a couple of women that ventured out from the Four Seasons and started their own wedding planning companies, and I for some reason always stayed in touch with them. Something I was really good at was keeping friendships for a long time. And when I was throwing out ideas, I had a couple of them take me to different wedding events, and just learning about the industry and what it would take to start something. And originally I started by renting kitchen space in an already existing bakery because you can do that and have your own separate health permits. You just have to be operating at a different time. And so that kind of made it a little bit restricting because it was in Chinatown on Jones Boulevard. And he gave me, space in the bakery and a little bit of refrigerator space, and I could use all his equipment. And so that was really good for the first year when I started in 2011. And then I, I got married and decided to start a family. And once I had my child, I was like, oh, I think I want to just be a stay-at-home mom. I really want to focus on raising my daughter and get her through her first, until she goes to public school. I'll just stay home and until that time comes. Well, when you are somebody that has worked 12 hours a day for many, many years and working two jobs sometimes. When I first moved to Vegas, I was working at the Four Seasons, but that was at nighttime. I had the night shift for that. And so during the day, I was doing like convention modeling and, and things like that. And so I was just used to just completely packing my schedule and then going from that to staying at home. While it is very rewarding, it was not for me. And I think she was 3 months old when I started formulating a business plan.
Mhm.
I got a small business software because nobody in my family had ever had a business before. So I didn't really know where to get started. And so that's where I started with this business plan software because was able to use that to construct a business plan that I could take to investors and say like, hey, this is what I need for this, and this is what you're going to get back, whatnot. So that's what I did with my free time when the baby was sleeping during the day. And somehow I found a space, secured the location, found a contractor and everything. And I ended up opening the bakery on my daughter's first birthday.
Wow.
So and part of that, it wasn't a shell from scratch. It was an already existing business that was geared towards food. It was a smoothing shop, so it still, it had kind of the bare bones. So that's why it didn't take more than 9 months to build it. But
How easy did you find the investors for your business plan?
luckily, I did have a couple of family members that were interested, and so, but they were still very strict with me. Like this, this was their retirement, and so I had to be very cognizant about every dollar that was spent, but um, it ended up being fine. And then I did have to get a business line of credit from the bank to supplement what I got because the contractor was more expensive than what the initial proposal was. But I mean, luckily, I just had at that time, I did have people that had faith in me and had known my work ethic. I think that was really important. It wasn't just, I was a stay-at-home mom that had this dream. I actually worked in that field for a good 7 years before I decided to start my own bakery. So
If this time would be right now, would you still open a bakery, or having your experience, would you not go into that business again?
that is a really good question, and I love answering this question. So I would probably still do the bakery, but I would not focus so much on weddings and just being like the main decorator and main face of the business. I think I would go into more of a franchise situation. Having hindsight, I think there was a Nothing Bundt Cakes that was for sale. I didn't have nearly the capital to be able to do something like that, but something that's a little bit easier to standardize. But still, you can still take a Nothing Bundt Cake home and still kind of make it your own. And they can do that too at the locations. But I think I would do something more like that just because everything was so dependent on me, even some deliveries, because you can't just deliver a 6-tier wedding cake all in one, like already put together at the bakery and then put it in the car. I know those cake shows kind of try to tell you that you can, and and then they create this drama when the cake falls over and then they have a backup magically. But in reality, you have to go there and stack it, and then when you stack it, you still have to finish the decorating. So it's a very skilled it's a very, very skilled industry that is so heavily reliant on either your employees or yourself. And for me, it was me a lot of it. I mean, my employees were amazing. I had two really great decorators that I could trust to deliver cakes. But let's say, they were women too, and one of them went on maternity leave, one of them was getting married, and so there's all those extra elements that go into it that you can't always rely on that. So having something that's a little bit more standard would have definitely been something that I would have looked into instead.
You've been a resident of Las Vegas for quite some
Mhm.
time, and you've seen these changes in taxes, in other policies. Could you foresee how the climate for business would change in the nearest, let's say, 5 years?
Well, if taxes and the cost of living and the education stays low, but all of that keeps increasing, I don't see why businesses would continue to want to come here. So, I mean, right now it is good. Even post COVID, I think that we were able to recover as a city or as a state, I guess. But if taxes keep increasing and, different even tenant laws and landlord laws, if those go in the other direction, then I can see it not being a very attractive place for businesses to come.
I've read online that before Elon Musk went to Texas, he was considering Nevada.
Hmm.
Do you know why he didn't choose Nevada?
I know that education was one of the considerations, which is why the state legislators have looked so hard at the education system because that was a huge loss for Nevada. So that was a big topic of discussion how, like I said, how education ties into the attractive climate of the business climate here in Nevada. So, yeah.
What about business in solar or other green energy? The state has a lot of land.
Hmm.
Why won't we use it to produce electrical
Hmm.
energy?
Well, we see that we have a lot of land. However, I forget what the exact percentage is, but it's upwards of 70% of the land is still owned by the federal government. So we literally have our hands tied unless the federal government releases the BLM land to us.
Um, do you plan to run next time? And if yes, what would be your program? Which
Mhm.
questions would you rise? How would you build your campaign maybe differently comparing to the one which
Mhm.
you've just
Oh
finished?
my
And I would say
goodness.
pretty successfully to me.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So the campaign that that just occurred, it was so emotional, right? Because it was just you, as a candidate, you put so much hard work in, and it's not even the work; it's you put yourself out there, and people might have a vision of you, and you feel like you're being under a microscope at all times, which is fine. That's what public service is, and you should be, and we should know, what intents that you have. Would I run again? I want to. Like it's easy for me to say yes, absolutely. I want to. I got so close. I would kind of be foolish not to, just because technically on election night, we all thought that I won that election because I did. And then all of a sudden, all the mail started coming in, and every day I was still winning, even though it was chipping away at the difference, right? And by Saturday, I think is when the big mail dump came, and then I had lost by like only 300 votes, considering over what 24,000 people voted. I think if I were to run again, it's not the messaging, it's the getting people out of their homes and motivated to vote. So I think what happened with COVID and these mail in ballots was that it made it very easy to vote. So you would think more people would vote, but it's pretty incredible how many people don't vote, even though we're literally spoon feeding you these ballots, and you don't even have to have it in. Like, common sense would tell me I'll have to mail this in. I should probably get it in the week before election day. No, we're only asking you to have it postmarked on election day. So you only have to get it in the mailbox. It comes to your house. Like, you have You have every opportunity to vote. And it's so incredible to me how many people don't vote. So I don't think necessarily the problem was party lines, it was motivation as voters and getting people involved and making people feel that their vote matters. And I think that I can really speak on that because if you only lose by 300 votes out of 24,000, that's just, I don't know, the block, one of my neighborhood blocks, or a little gated community worth of people that, had they turned in their ballot, could have made a difference. So I think I would be more messaging and having people come out to vote, and having people excited to vote for you, and just even telling them like, hey, I'll take your ballot for you, because that's apparently legal now, which I thought would be illegal, ballot harvesting. But people, you can send a campaign team to people's doors and say, hey, where's your ballot, and collect it from them. So we have every plan in place to get voters out there. But you know, when I ran, it was an off year. It was midterm election, so perhaps that had a lot to do with it. And people are only really cognizant of elections during presidential years, so perhaps that had a lot to do with it. And I think that's why so many people are approaching me that you should run again in 2024 because it's a presidential year. You know, and maybe that would make a difference. I'm not sure. It's, I guess it would depend on what am I doing next year? What, you know, what's going on with my current career? Am I going this direction? Do I want to, because I don't want to run and then get in office and then have it not be for me either. I think that I want to be fair to the system. And, you know, of course, when I ran last time, I had run before and I really wanted to do it. And I just feel that Nevada, it's a rough state to be in when you're in my party, because you're in the minority. In the assembly's case, because I lost my seat, had I won my seat, we would have still been in the minority, but me losing my seat created a super minority in the assembly. So that's all the Democrats needed to have 2/3 majority on any bill that they want to pass in the assembly. Granted, it's the bills still have to pass at the Senate level, and it's a little bit more evenly, slightly more evenly distributed. They don't have a super minority there. However, at the assembly level, any bill can pass from the other party line, and that was really disappointing that happened. So it's very emotional. Lost a lot of sleep at night, you know.
Definitely. Well, our team was following, and we would definitely try our best from the media to encourage people to vote.
Yes.
From my like, I've been dealing with youth a lot, either through film or athletics, and I also noticed that a lot of young people, they're pretty not motivated. Let's be diplomatic.
Yes.
People are very sensitive, and it always was a question why you don't care. It's your home, it's your town, it's your state, it's your country. If you don't care, what if someone comes and, you know, wants to invade? You'll just say,
Especially
welcome.
where you come from.
Well,
You know, well, your experience in growing up, I imagine.
that is true. However, I had pretty international and multicultural influence on my upbringing, and I had a lot of influence from Europe and Asia.
Right, but you see what's going on in your own home country is what I'm saying. And what can happen.
It's a mess. It's a mess, but it's all to me it was predictable, and it's not something surprising, but it's a signal for everyone that if you guys and girls don't care, you don't care what politicians do, you don't care what's going on, this is what's going to happen.
Well, and here's the other thing too. Maybe they care, but they don't think that their vote makes a difference. And I can be the spokesperson that your vote absolutely makes a difference, you know? So
Definitely. We could see Russian Federation or China when people don't believe that their vote matters or their voice matters.
yeah, they just come complacent.
Yeah, and it becomes autocracy. It becomes, you know, back to USSR or even worse, like a kingdom. So we'll definitely try to encourage our citizens to vote, whether they support left side or right side, but at least go and vote, give your voice. And
I'm the type of person too that, so prior to me jumping in the race, I did look at, okay, who do I think might be running from my own party for this seat? Because we do have primary elections, and so we would have to run against each other if that were the case. And so I had to go back in history. I literally went on Ballotpedia and checked who ran last time and who would possibly want to run again. And I did contact those people. One of them who ran last time was going to run for school board, so he was not going to run for assembly. And so I offered to sit down to coffee and like, let's talk about this, and let's say, our ideas the same. Well, if we agree on everything, then why are we going to battle each other in the primary? Because that's just wasted resources, a wasted energy, wasted time. So I do consider that, because I do think that there is so much wasted when two people that have the same ideas have to battle each other in a primary election. I don't think that those resources are utilized well. It's just wasted.
definitely. Well, we'll keep an eye on what's going on. We'll keep contacting you. Will be great if we could have you next time and we could talk about the
Oh, sure.
legislators,
Yes,
the new
absolutely.
governor, and what's going on in the business environment.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Tiffany, for coming.
Thank you for having
Tiffany
me.
Jones. Let's stay tuned.
Okay.